We have an input of what we put in our mouth. We have an input of UV radiation in our skin. We have an input of damage to muscle, etc., etc. Your job, regardless of what your goals are, is to understand those input boxes, if you like, and then understand the best way to tick those boxes. And then your machinery will take care of itself, and your output will be whatever is optimal for you, because that's what evolution is coded for over 4.5 to 6 million years, depending on which scientific paper you'd like to quote.
We are joined with Dr. Abs, very popular now on YouTube, has a great channel. But today I want to get some insights from Dr. Abs. And first off, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time. Now, you're a dentist to start with, among other things. If you have a look at his bio, he does quite a lot. A bit of a renaissance man. How did you get into the carnivore space?
So it was actually through my patients. I guess typically nowadays, if a patient comes in and they say, this happened, or I'm thinking this, doctor typically, I don't want to generalize, but I think it's safe to say there are doctors out there that will almost dismiss that and say, no, you're actually feeling this. And one day I basically just thought, well, what if I learn from the patient? And that's basically where it all stemmed from. So when I was still doing dentistry, I retired. I do other things now. I had a couple of patients with non-responsive gum disease. I referred to a specialist. They even carried out surgical therapy. That failed after non-surgical therapy, and the patient just said, "Look, I know you're trying to help, but I can't keep going through rounds of treatment. I've got to stop." And I said, "Look, that's absolutely fine. I completely get it. Keep in touch. If you need anything, you know where I am." And I never really thought anything after that, because I never saw them for a long time. But a while later, I think somewhere between 6 and 12 months, roughly speaking, these guys came back, separate occasions. One of them said they went carnivore. I had no idea what that was. And the other one was talking about keto. I had no idea what that was either. And I thought, well, this is a bit weird, but I can't deny what I'm seeing. Like, I did all the measurements and I measured 0 gum disease. And I thought, I'm not imagining this. And the patient isn't lying, and the patient isn't delusional. I'm measuring a loss of gum disease, a reversal of gum disease, and I didn't do anything. I followed the protocol that I was taught to follow, and nothing happened. I let the patient go, and the patient just changed their diet, and suddenly it's reversed. And I thought, there has to be something to this. I didn't know what it was, but I thought, okay, there's something going on here. At that point, I realized, okay, I have to understand something more about nutrition. I didn't know what, but I had to do it. And so I started paying attention more to nutrition. And once I understood nutrition and I realized that, glucose and fatty acids, they're broken down into things, and then those things are made into other things. That's metabolism. It's the sequence of building things and breaking things. And then once I understood metabolism more, not that I became an expert or anything, but then I realized, okay, well, there's more to it than that, because the metabolism is heavily around mitochondria. And then I started understanding as much as I could about mitochondria. And something clicked, because when I was at university, I was very fortunate that one of my tutors actually mentioned what's called the glycerol fatty acid cycle. Some people now call it the glucose fatty acid cycle. I thought it was boring as hell. I barely paid attention, but for some reason I remembered that he said that. And a while later, I realized there's something really important there. And nowadays, thanks to Professor Bart Kay, his lordship, we all know it as the Randall cycle. And I've got to credit Bart. He's the guy that really brought it to the attention of people on social media. It wasn't me. It wasn't anyone else. It was him. And for me, I was very lucky that someone mentioned it to me many years ago. And I started looking into that. And when I looked into that a lot more, then I realized, well, we have to eat a particular way, because of biochemistry means we have to eat a particular way. I thought, well, if our feet are built in a particular way, it means the feet must be used in a particular way. And I thought, well, the toes are pretty short compared to the size of the foot, which means the bend is meant to be at the front, which means if we do that, the ankle is elevated, which means there's no force going through the ankle directly. So we're designed to sprint and not jog, where heel comes down first. When we're sprinting, our front of our foot comes down first, and because our body weight is forward. And I thought, well, if our physical makeup gives us clues as to how we're meant to run, why does it not give us clues about how we're meant to do everything? Because what we have about us physically is the totality of everything that's gone on in evolution. So why would it not inform us on not just whether we're meant to sprint or jog, but also what we're meant to eat, and the fact that we're meant to go outside and not be cooped up indoors all day so we can get vitamin D from the sun, etc., etc. Once I understood that, I'm a little bit embarrassed to say this, but my conclusion, my premature conclusion from trying to understand the glycerol fatty acid cycle, was that we have to have a vegan meal followed by meat later on, because I thought we could only do one at the time. Little did I pay attention to something which you'll know, I'm sure, as someone studying biochemistry, something called Le Chatelier's principle, which I won't go into it in detail here, but this is basically a look at a reaction, a reversible reaction in chemistry. Typically A goes to B, but in some situations A and B both coexist in certain ratios because they interchange within each other. And when I understood that, then I realized, okay, well, that explains something called thermodynamic feasibility. And breaking down glucose is not actually feasible, thermodynamically speaking, until we couple it to other reactions, and that's when it becomes feasible, and the basket of reactions is possible to do. Once I realized that, then I realized, okay, well, there's an element of resistance if we're going in one direction in a reversible reaction. And then I thought, well, if we're doing that, there's an element of resistance to changing which pathway we're going down. That's when very, very slowly, I'm talking after 6 years possibly of first looking at the glycerol fatty acid cycle, that light bulb came into my head. So it shows how little I understand of it even now after all this time, and how much more I've got to learn. But when I understood that, I started to realize actually that cycle isn't about telling us we have to have a vegan meal and have the meat separately. It's about telling us the selection of fuel is based on what was previously selected, because you can't just shift momentum very, very quickly. And it took, like I said, it took me many, many, many years to figure out the basics of that. And that's when I realized, okay, so that means we have to eat one way or the other, not one followed by the other. And I realized, well, if we eat only the carb side with the protein, well, obviously that's plants because they don't really have fat. Or if we go the other way, well, that's meat, because meat doesn't really have much carb. It's just got the glycogen in the muscle. And the first way is what we call veganism. And the other way, I didn't know what it was called, but I thought it was too weird to be the correct answer because of all the dogma of what we're taught in school. I thought, well, it can't be veganism because we know that vegans become deficient. And if we followed a diet for millions of years that led to a deficiency, we would have all been wiped out millions of years ago. And I thought, well, it means it's the other way. But I still didn't believe it for a long, long time, because I've got to be an idiot. That doesn't make any sense based on what I was taught as a child, that you have to have a balanced diet. So I kind of forgot it. And eventually it came back and I thought I would try it. And I started trying it. And when I started trying it, I still didn't know there was a carnivore community out there, because I kind of got into it myself. After starting, then I realized, okay, this is a real thing. And I saw Jordan Peterson because I was looking up gum disease from nutrition. And I stumbled across him. I thought, okay, he's done it as well. I'm not imagining it. And then I found the carnivore community. And it was a very strange way. I think it's a very abnormal, shall we say, or uncommon way to getting into carnivore, because it was through biochemistry and not an influencer. But I'm very glad I'm here. I've met some fantastic people. And I don't think I'll ever leave, because it's the best thing ever. Yeah,
that's a great story. Yeah, I mean, it usually does take us some time because like I was the same. It took me a while to sort of wean myself down onto the carnivore diet, because like you said, it's the dogma of our education and everything. It's like, you have to have a good balanced diet. You got to eat the rainbow and all the rest of that BS. But yeah, and it takes a while to really come around, doesn't it? You think, well, should I try this or not? It's like it just seems it's too simple. It can't possibly be right, you know. So you just overthink it, I guess. But yeah, you're right. It's if you have a look at the biochemistry way, you know there's no possible other way that we should be eating, and especially if you look at the history as well. Even in dentistry, actually, there's a good doctor. What's his name? Dr. Kevin Stock. You may know. He looks at the history of our jaw structure, our bone structure, and everything like that. The difference between the agricultural revolution and hunter-gatherer, our size, stature. They never had dentists back then. But they had perfect teeth. Even their skulls now have a much better jaw structure and bone structure for their teeth than even recent 100-year-old skulls. So there's got to be something to it,
And I think it's an incredible. You've made a really good point there that I think is important for people to realize. The reason I got into looking at nutrition wasn't just because the patients told me they changed their nutrition, the gum disease disappeared. When that happened, and I realized a while later, okay, I want to look into this, I started Googling for basically topics within dentistry connected to nutrition, or diseases within dentistry and nutrition. That made me stumble one day into someone who is probably one of my biggest heroes in life, period. And I'm sure many people in the space have heard of him. His name is Weston Price. And he published, his work, Price 1914 is the reference, Nutrition, Physical Degeneration. And he, I believe, I could be wrong on this, and I'm happy to hold my hands up if I am, but I believe he was one of the first, if not the first, to really draw the sort of line, the connection line between what we eat and our physical makeup in terms of how we look, symmetry, the full development of the jaw, the teeth, all these things. And I completely agree with Dr. Kevin Stock. I think he's talking absolute sense. And I think more people need to be talking about that. And Weston Price, what's also quite important for me individually is the fact that people say, Dr. R.A.W, you're a dentist, which I'm not, I was a dentist. What do you know about nutrition? Why are you talking about this? And I thought, well, the first inkling that we got in society that nutrition causes these things was by a dentist, because he noticed the changes in the physical makeup and the structure, thanks to what he saw clinically as a dentist. He went away in the world and looked all these things up. So I think for me, that was the turning point. When I read his book many years ago, I thought, right, I've entered a rabbit hole and I've really got to go as deep as possible. So if anyone is interested in looking up, a bit of a deeper look at what Dr. Kevin Stock is rightly saying, my advice is to read that book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. Even if you're having kids, you want your kids to be beautiful and good looking and, well grown and developed physically and mentally, read that book. Okay. It's going to give you so much. And I think it's going to change your life. Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, cosmetic side aside, it's not just about, physical beauty, things like that, but physical structure. You want your child to be fully developed, and that's it's not just bone structure either. It's like brain development and everything else that comes with it. So if you have a look at, 95% of the world's vegetarian societies are so because of economic reasons, not because of philosophical reasons. But have a look at India, for example. This was only introduced after British colony, of course, but since then, and now they have the highest diabetic rate in the world.
Yeah.
But the growth rate of children, the mortality rate of children, the underdevelopment of these cultures, they are shorter in stature, much more bone density problems, mental health problems, and just all in all, just brain development as well. It's just a complete lack of development. So this is something you 100%. Want to avoid.
Yeah, and I mean, some people watching this may know this, some may not, but I was actually born in India, and I grew up there as a child. Obviously, can't tell by my accent, but I can put it on if needed. But I know it very, very well, and all my family is in India, and they've all got metabolic problems, diabetes, heart disease, things that stem from that as well. They're overweight, they're obese, all these things. I have none of those things, and they look at me like as if I am unhealthy. And I cannot for the life of me see any logic behind that. And the reason they think that is because they have an inability to consider the possibility that the way they act and eat in their life, which is highly religiously dictated, literally, is wrong. And this is, I think, is the problem in countries such as that, where, at least in certain parts of it, maybe not in all of it, there is a lack of scientific education or access to scientific education, which allows people to think critically. And I could not agree more with you. There is such a problem in metabolic health there. Not that there's a metabolic health meter you can buy to measure, but I think it's pretty obvious what's going on. And whether it's for economic reasons or religious reasons or a combination of reasons, it's an absolute shame that, you know, we live in a society where that is still playing a role nowadays in dietary choices when it doesn't have to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's 2025. We should be beyond this kind of stuff. When you think about 10,000 years ago, they never thought about nutrition or anything, but they're a lot healthier than we are now. It's crazy. But like going back to, I mean, what does a dentist have to do with nutrition? Well, these are symptoms of nutrition problems. Like I was talking to last year, I spoke to Dr. James Mookie. He's an Australian doctor here. He was actually Australian of the Year here in 2020. But he's working on changing the dietary guidelines, and he's an ophthalmologist. He works on people's eyesight and things like that. So, what does he have to do with nutrition? Well, the leading cause of adult blindness in Australia and around the world is diabetes. So these are all symptoms that different dentists or ophthalmologists or anything that they should know about nutrition. And unfortunately, doctors don't do any nutritional sort of study in university at all.
Nah. Me included.
Which is just it's crazy. So these are really important things that people should understand as well. And there's another say I think I forget who said it, but there's more wisdom in our bodies than there is in the greatest philosophy around the world, because our body really does know what it needs. Couldn't
agree more.
Absolutely. So now, I mean, how long have you been doing this now? How long have you been in the carnivore space and into the carnivore diet?
I've been doing the carnivore diet probably about a year and a half now. I'm not 100%. I would admit that I'm probably around, say, 90 to 95% carnivore. So what are the exceptions? Well, for me, once a month, I will have ice cream because I am a child and I love sweet things. I will have a little bit of pepper with my salt on occasion, if I want a little bit of fire in there. And I will have some sauces with my meats, ketchup or something along those lines. And occasionally I might have something with the meat, with some sausages, or I might have maybe a chili or a gherkin or something along those lines. And they're pretty much all the exceptions. So that's how strict or unstrict I am, however you personally feel about that. In terms of in the carnivore space, I think I came out as a carnivore, for want of a better phrase, probably around the same time. I think it was probably a few weeks after. So I think my first video where I said I'm carnivore, I went carnivore, was probably at the time of recording, it was probably last February, March, something along those lines. So about a year and a half.
Yeah. Okay. So among some of the other things that you do, you also into skin health and things like that. So how has the carnivore diet affected that side of things for you?
Yeah, so I do a lot of work in cosmetic medicine. I teach it all around the world. I was teaching it in Italy literally less than 24 hours ago, in fact. And we look at, the skin, we look at the fat, we look at the bone structure, we look at everything. And in the cosmetic side, what people don't realize is nutrition is so highly implicated in the way you age, and as a result, the way you look as you age. On a very, very basic level, if we have a lot of glucose, we're going to have more glycation damage. Don't have to be a genius to figure that one out. And glycation affects everything in your body, right? Even your DNA, your cell membranes. It affects the matrix outside the cell, including the collagen and the elastin, these things that people chase by looking at injectables and things along those lines. And when we start to really inflame our body by trying to go down both gears at the same time in the glucose fatty acid cycle, which we can't do, it's inherently inflammatory. And as a result of that, the ability of the cell to function at its maximum operating efficiency and do the best it can, in layman's terms, is reduced. And when we look at that in a skin context, obviously the skin is not going to be as tight as it could be. It's not going to be as smooth as it could be. It's not going to be as even toned as it could be. It's not going to hold the characteristics that it has the way it could do going into the future. And so when we start to correct the nutrition, and I mean correct because I think the carnivore diet is the correct diet when you look at the biochemistry, what we see is quite remarkable things. So for example, I've had cases of melasma, which is really strong pigmentation. In layman's terms, sometimes it's referred to as the mask of pregnancy. Melasma is notorious to treat well. And even if you try to treat it and you get an improvement, it could just come back. I've seen melasma disappear by itself, simply with nutritional therapy. I've seen cases of really quite bad acne disappear with no clinical treatment, just with nutritional therapy. I've seen the same with psoriasis and eczema completely disappear, and rosacea, in fact, completely disappear just with nutritional therapy. And one person in my online school group, I think it was Matthew, if he's watching, we helped him go carnivore or stay carnivore, one or the other. And he said, I did an experiment. I had Brussels sprouts again just to try them. And the next day my rosacea came back. And I don't think you could ask for a better example of how closely connected nutrition is to the cosmetic side of your life and the way you look and the way you age. So the way I work cosmetically now, if a patient isn't interested in addressing their diet, I'm not seeing them. They can go elsewhere. So yes, we can look at skincare. Yes, we can look at injectables and devices like lasers, not a problem. But what's the point of trying to fill your bucket if there's a hole in at the bottom? It's going to pour out. What's the point of doing any kind of treatment if you're going to age the exact same way and not look after yourself? Your results aren't going to last. I'm, taking your money and not giving you a long-term result, just a short-term. That's not worth it. So the cosmetic treatment plan for any patient, in my view, the first thing is diet and lifestyle. The second thing is actual cosmetic treatment, be it clinical or home. And then you get lasting results and better results, in my opinion. So there's a huge connection. And I think if you don't address that, you're fighting a losing battle, and you're just clutching at straws, and your wallet is going to empty, even if you get a good result, because that battle is going to keep on going. So you have to keep on doing treatments to maintain things. And I don't think you have to. If the diet and lifestyle are right, you can have a much more minimal treatment plan that is much cheaper and more cost effective. At least what I can see in clinic anyway.
Yeah. So when you use dietary interventions for your patient, do you put them on a carnivore diet then? So
good question. I don't put everyone on a carnivore diet because typically I do have patients with a little bit more complexity in their medical history. And so what we will do is potentially go towards a carnivore diet, and we may never get there for a multitude of reasons, or we can aim to get there. And some people do. Some people actually naturally go that way by themselves because of how good they feel the closer they are to carnivore. So my job is to simply educate them, and I show them, what's going on, and what happens if you do this, and what happens if you do that. And naturally, they will gravitate towards that anyway. And a lot of people, they know that I'm carnivore when they come to me, so they want to transition. It's not as though I'm telling them to do it in the majority of cases. And so we do go that way, and they expect both a nutritional therapeutic plan as well as a direct cosmetic plan simultaneously to go together. Now, if a patient cannot go fully carnivore for various reasons, then what we'll do is try and at least get them onto a low carb diet. And for those watching, what do I define as low carb? For me personally, not that there's a generalized universal definition, but for me personally, I define low carb for my patients as 30 grams or less of carbohydrates. And I think that's perfectly reasonable over the course of 24 hours. If you're above that, I wouldn't say you're low carb, but if you're 31, you're not exactly going to go to jail and police aren't going to lock you up. It's a guide for people to understand. So typically, at the very least, I'll put them on max 30 grams of carbs a day and we'll transition. So as an example, if someone comes to me and they have been a hardcore vegan for many years and they've got a complex medical history, I will transition that person over maybe 6 months. So if they are hardcore vegan, complex medical history, and they've been that way for a very long time, my transition is usually 6 months or more. Because I personally feel, and this is purely based on my personal clinical experience, no scientific evidence, I personally feel the further you are from carnivore to start with, the longer your transition should be. So if we take the opposite, say we take someone who is pretty meat heavy already, just because they like it, they don't really do much else apart from the meat, and they've got no medical history, everything's nice and clear, I might transition them over maybe 6 to 8 weeks. Most people are somewhere in the middle of that. And so that's the type of transition we do. And that's the end goal, at least max 30 grams of carbs a day. And we'll adapt it based on the individual.
Yeah. No, that's a great idea. I think, I think you're right. You need to personally adapt, different people, depending on where they're coming from.
Absolutely.
And, especially for a vegan, a longer transition is going to take, there's kind of all kinds of issues going on there, including emotionally and mentally and things like that as well.
Exactly.
But like you said, like we were saying before, you can't just flip a switch, eat a vegan meal now, in the morning, and then, carnivore in the evening sort of thing.
Yeah.
It takes time for your body to adapt.
Yeah.
Something people don't understand. Yeah, great example there. Skin health. I've always, I used to live in Japan, and there's the big cosmetic. There's a very big. the cosmetic industry is huge all over the world, but in Japan, it's all about how they do this makeup and things like that. It used to drive me nuts. It's it's more about what you put into your body, not what you put onto it. But you get that, and I've got actually I did a couple of interviews. A good friend of mine. Sami Tagano, she lives in Japan, and she had eczema. Eczema is quite a big problem in Japan because they eat a lot of white flour and so on, like noodles and things like that recently in the last 100 years or so. But her doctor at age 6 put her on a vegan diet, and it just got worse and worse. And in her in her late 40s, she was diagnosed with colon cancer. And now she's managing it all, and her skin's much healthier now on the carnivore diet. Another friend of mine, Carolina Barton in Poland, she had a dance career. She is a professional, well-renowned dancer, but she had to give it up because of eczema. She couldn't handle it. She studied nutrition, went full carnivore, and now she has no eczema symptoms at all. It's incredible. It really is an amazing difference what a high-fat carnivore diet can do. Always think about what you put into your body, not just what you put onto it. Yeah. Although it does have an effect, what you absorb through the skin is, it's through the endocrine system and everything like that as well. So you talk on, you speak around the world about cosmetics and dentistry and things like that. You're also a professional trainer. How has this impacted your business and your lifestyle?
Yeah, so I do teach around the world. I teach a lot of different topics. It's all scientific. Dentistry, I've really only taught in the UK. For example, I lectured at University of Leeds quite a few times. Nowadays, when I go around the world, it's teaching more the medical side. And that includes, quite a lot of the cosmetic. But it's affected me because whenever I teach cosmetic now, I talk about nutrition. And I try to impart the knowledge to these doctors that you cannot be treating disease or trying to improve the cosmetic appearance of someone without considering nutrition at all. And for example, not that long ago
Every morning we make choices. What to eat, how to move, how to live. But what if the smallest choice, something as simple as a supplement, could help your body rebuild, restore, and thrive? Our bodies are incredible machines, constantly working to repair and renew. But modern life, stress, diet, aging, can slow that process down. That's where science meets nature. R.A.W, a biotech pioneer, has spent decades researching how to support your body's natural systems. Stem Enhance Ultra, backed by clinical studies, boosts your body's release of stem cells, helping repair and renew tissues. Plasma Flow supports healthy circulation, delivering nutrients where they're needed most. And C-Active balances inflammation, clearing the path for your body to heal. Sarah and Mark didn't always feel this way. Like many of us, they felt the weight of fatigue, aches, and stress. But they discovered a way to support their bodies from within. Choosing a healthier path isn't just about making a single decision. It's about embracing a lifestyle that supports your well-being every day. With R.A.W, you're not just taking supplements. You're making a commitment to your health journey. R.A.W's products aren't just supplements. They're a commitment to extraordinary health. Made from natural ingredients like Klamath algae and spirulina, they're designed to work with your body, not against it. For Sarah, it's energy to keep up with her day. For Mark, it's recovery to stay active. For both, it's a step toward a longer, healthier life. Backed by years of research, patents, and a mission to build extraordinary lives, R.A.W is changing how we think about wellness. Small choices, big impact. Start with one capsule, one step toward vitality. With R.A.W, you're not just living, you're thriving. Ready to feel extraordinary? Visit dcfit.cerewl.com to discover Stem Enhance Ultra, Plasma Flow, and C-Active, your partners in wellness.
In Switzerland, just last week actually, and also in Tirana in Albania, just I think a few weeks before that, I was actually teaching oncology. Now, full disclosure, I'm not an oncologist. I've never had oncological training at all. And yet there were oncology consultants in the room. And when I showed them what I showed them, and I talked about how important metabolism is in these things, and I showed them the work of Professor Thomas Seyfried, and I talked about the difference between oxidative phosphorylation and fermentation, etc., etc. I pulled up any number of papers and I quoted them off the top of my head. They froze, and they couldn't tell me that I was barking mad, to use a very British phrase there. And so my teaching never, ever goes without nutrition now, in every single case. And because people know that about me, they can't wait to learn both the nutritional aspect and the cosmetic aspect at the same time now, which I think is becoming more popular. And I'm glad, and I hope that, even though I'm one person on my own and I have a little impact by myself, hopefully that impact will spread and they will speak to other people and understand. And I know that wherever I go, the organizers of these events, they message me and say, X number of people are carnivore now because of you. And they came to our event and they said they wouldn't eat anything because there's no meat or something. And I'm having to change what I put at the event now because of you. And I'm really glad I'm having that. So I think it's had initially a difficult impact, doing this and my teaching, because people don't expect me to talk about nutrition. They think I'm a nut job. But then when I whip out the biochemistry and they realize it's not an opinion I'm giving, it's a fact, they start to get it. But now it's because I'm known for that a lot more in these circles. It's becoming easier and easier. And I think it's spreading a whole lot more. And even in the UK where I am, there are doctors talking to patients about carnivore. And I know that because those patients then come onto my YouTube and they say, I was with Dr. So-and-so, I'm carnivore because of him, and he said he's carnivore because of you, so I wanted to say thank you and things. So I think it's slowly working, and hopefully if people like yourself, speaking to the public directly, and people like myself trying to get it into the medical profession, we can meet in the middle, and we'll have a much better impact as time goes on.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing, isn't it? It's really good to see. I mean, there's a lot of things working against us talking about the carnivore diet.
Yeah.
The food industry is quite a big industry. It's like an octopus. It's got tentacles everywhere, so it's very difficult. and we get very, very much restricted as well. So it is a great thing to see it actually making headway, and it is getting easier to speak about too. Like you said, like when you first start talking about carnivore diet, people think you're crazy. And they come out with all sorts of things like this, it causes heart disease and all this sort of other ridiculous nonsense. But when you get into the hard facts, you can't debate. I suppose you can debate it, but you can't
prove it wrong.
No, that's right. And you can't deny the amount of stories. There's no other diet that has the amount of stories of people healing and recovering on this way of eating. Which is, you still get deniers, of course, but it does make you question the IQ of humanity sometimes, honestly.
Absolutely. I do that every day of my life in my job, man, trust me.
You just read some of the comments you get on YouTube. It's like, wow. And then you're trying to explain things, and I've learned that you just can't argue with stupid because they just double down.
No. I've got a video on my channel. I think it probably went up about a month ago, at the time of recording. It's basically me going through the Randall cycle, and no one can go through that, understand it, and then think a balanced diet is healthy. And I can't make it any more factual by just going through biochemistry and not giving my opinion whatsoever, or anyone else's opinion, or any marketing or any guidelines. Pure metabolic pathways in biochemistry. And people still look at that and think, well, what about the balanced diet? And I would pull my hair out and end up like Bart if it keeps on happening.
That's right. That's like you said before, like Bart's been great actually explaining things like that. He was the first one to actually start talking about the Randall cycle, and look how that's caught on now. There's a lot of people out there trying to act like they know what it is and what it does, and then they say, like, actually brings me to a good subject. This idiot is spruiking the sugar diet at the moment. Carbs in the absence of fat will make you lean. What are your thoughts on that?
Probably the same as your thoughts, to be honest. I think it's utter garbage. I think honestly, when I first heard it, I thought it was a joke. I thought someone was playing a prank, and then I ignored it, and then I kept seeing it pop up, and I thought, are people actually taking this seriously? And I can't understand what makes people take it seriously. There's stuff in my head and your head where that sugar diet, it can't compute. It won't go in. It's not possible. And so I can't fathom of the mind or minds where that can go in and compute. And it just tells me there's such a lack of education on nutrition out there. It's pandemic. And if we spent our government's budgets on that, we wouldn't be spending anywhere near as much in healthcare, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can imagine moving the healthcare budget into education. It would be incredible. I think that the global estimated healthcare budget at the moment, I think it's like 2030. They're predicting it to hit over $50 trillion, which is just absolutely phenomenal. That's. Think what
I can't even imagine that. I literally can't imagine that amount of money.
It's incredible, isn't it? It's absolutely it's obscene. Absolutely obscene. And like if going again, like 10,000 years ago, there was no medical system, and like even 200 years ago, it wasn't anything like this. So what's changed?
I think what's happened in medicine is the fact that we swapped dying young for dying old with disease. And what that tells me, or the way I look at that, I should say, is what's happened is we haven't actually figured out the root cause of our problems. We've just figured out ways to kick the can down the road so we can live with the problems for longer. And we figured out methods to try and suppress symptoms as opposed to figuring out root cause. So we suppress the symptoms and we can live with it for longer, but we still got the disease and we're still coming up with more diseases. Because I think with the advancement in medicine that we have now, I think it's safe to say medicine now is more advanced than it's ever been. And, you can say that for every year going forward. And yet, as you correctly said, we've got more disease now than we've ever had. How is that possible? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And so that's why I think we've just swapped we've swapped dying young for dying old with disease. And we've failed to find root causes. We've succeeded in making lots and lots of money for lots and lots of drug companies who base their business on making people think symptom suppression is the same as root cause, which is a very sad thing to say. But I know I sound conspiratorial almost, or possibly at the very least too cynical, but that's genuinely how I feel about the situation.
Oh, absolutely. No, I agree. I totally agree. It's not even, I don't think we're so much swap dying young either. I mean, when they take it on averages,
Yep.
Take out the childhood mortality and things like that. People did live quite a long age back in the day, but they lived a much healthier, longer life. Like you say, like now we're just living longer with disease. So that's pretty much got us dying slowly enough that we think we are living.
Yeah.
Basically, that's how it's all going at the moment.
It's a trick, basically.
Yeah, it's crazy, and it's kind of maddening. Like, the longer you see a doctor these days, the more medications you accumulate. I know, like, people in my family, that the older they get, the more medications they are on, and everyone around me is on medications. I'm the only one, ironically, that's not.
Same.
I'm the outcast. Like, I'm the nutrition nut.
I mean, even when you look at this concept, which is becoming more popular now, of longevity, people are forming longevity clinics. They're calling themselves longevity doctors. I see that. I get it. I like the fact that people are thinking about health span. You can't knock that. I think that's a noble cause. But the problem is, most of them, they haven't got a clue what they're doing. First of all, nothing can be proven to make you live longer. It's impossible to draw cause and effect in that. All we can do is say, look, do X, Y, Z. And I believe, or my opinion is that this will give you the best possible opportunity or chance or likelihood or probability of minimizing your disease rate and maximizing your health span. That's the best you can say. And when you look at these longevity clinics and longevity doctors, I've never seen a single one talk about the importance of nutrition. And if they do, they talk utter nonsense. And when we see that, the marketing in this industry is very strong, by the way, and I see it, because if you can sell a product to someone that makes them believe they will live longer, you are touching the very core of their existence. And so the clambering over each other for products like supplements and things for longevity is huge. And that's almost replacing in people's minds healthcare. And it's mad. And I see that on a daily basis. In fact, I got an email this morning from a company that talks about longevity, and I looked at the product, it's complete garbage. And so, to anyone watching this, my advice to you, when it comes to longevity, go and just look any website or any physical clinic if you're near one. Look at what they are doing. The first thing they do to make you feel special, that's all it's for, they run like $1,000 or £1,000 of blood tests to make you think they really care about everything about you. What kind of a dumb idea is that? There are 3 stages, and this is how I teach. So if any of my doctor students are watching, you'll recognize this, but I teach that there are 3 stages of the function of our body, right? And very simply, a child can understand this. We have the input mechanisms, we have the machinery that takes the input, and then we have the output. So the input is things like, are we getting sunshine? Is that being registered in our skin cells to produce vitamin D? What are we putting in our mouth? Are we registering damage to our muscle tissue, i.e. lifting, etc., etc.? These are independent variables. These are the inputs. Then all the machinery we have in us, the totality of our physical makeup and our biochemistry, our metabolism, all our metabolic pathways, they take those inputs and then they respond to them in a preset way based on A, evolution, and B, genetics. And then we have an output, such as muscle repair or maintaining bone density because you've got enough vitamin D, etc., etc. So when you understand in a very simple way like that even a child can understand, what kind of moron, frankly, thinks the answer is to fiddle with the machinery? If you see a certain output, it's not a reflection of the machinery, it's a reflection of the independent variable, which is the input, not the machinery, which itself is a dependent variable in terms of what it's doing. And so these longevity clinics that do the blood test, they're not measuring the input or the output, they're measuring basically the machinery, because your blood level of this or that is a reflection of input. And so these clinics and these longevity experts who look at all the blood tests by default without understanding something so simple, I wouldn't trust anything else they say after that. And when they talk about a balanced diet, it tells me, well, they don't understand the substrate level inhibition between glucose and fatty acids, which means they have no idea that 3 times a day they are inflaming themselves to no end. And how can you be a longevity expert when inflammation is one of the biggest factors of aging, and you're letting your patient or advising your patient inflame themselves to wit's end multiple times a day? It is the most absurd thing I've ever seen. And it makes me seethe when I see these longevity experts and clinics or whatever not addressing these things. It tells me they know nothing about longevity. So to all of you watching this, do not fall for it, okay? As someone who does work in longevity, but does not claim to be an expert in the truest sense of the word, I use that word for marketing, I'm not gonna lie. But I think I'm expert enough to understand that 3 meals a day is garbage, that a balanced diet is garbage, that something that will give you longevity is garbage, because it's impossible to do that. And longevity actually comes from things which don't look good on a poster, things which aren't new, things which aren't trendy, and most of all, things which aren't expensive, right? It's free to go and let some sun fall on your skin. It's free to go and do exercise because you can sprint in your park, or you can lift a big bag of shopping and do some weights at home, whatever, even if you're struggling to get to a gym. And it's cheaper to eat one side of the Randall cycle than both sides at the same time. But no one will say that's for longevity, because you can't make massive amounts of profit on that. And this is another problem with what we're seeing in medicine nowadays. People are jumping on the longevity bandwagon, something they know nothing about, pretending to be an expert, and just spewing nonsense to all these people. So when you see these celebrity longevity gurus that don't address, number one, the diet, and number two, that nothing was proven to give you longevity, walk away. Walk away, follow your basic nutrition and basic inputs. When you think of that 3-stage system, all you need for longevity, in my view and opinion, is the right inputs. And the machinery takes care of itself, and the output is what we need, which is a good health span. Sorry, it's gone a bit of a rant, but I think that hopefully will help people.
No, exactly right. No, I agree 100%. And especially you get these like 20-something or early 30-something telling us, this is the longevity sort of thing. Okay, yeah. If you're 150 years old, you tell me what works for longevity. Okay.
Yeah.
Until then, just calm down. Because seriously, and there's always these new products that come out and say, like, this is great for longevity. It's like, how do you know? Like, it's like a week old.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But people love the hype, and they love what's new. It's a dopamine hit. Sort of thing,
unfortunately.
Talking of life hacks and things like, you're talking about sunlight as well, for skin health, and I mean D3, but also nitric oxide. The sunlight helps to release nitric oxide from the skin and things like that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is just an absolute miracle molecule. It's a wonderful thing, which people don't know about either. So what are some of the lifestyle hacks that you incorporate on a daily basis that help you? Yeah.
First of all, before I say it, I just want to contextualize these list of things by saying it's not anything special or fancy. It's not anything that you haven't heard of before. There's no drug that I take. It's genuinely basic stuff, most of which is free. And that really is the secret, if you like. The secret is that there is no secret, and people want to believe that there is something out there. If you have that philosophy, you will be taken advantage of, because a company will make an advert saying, oh, this is that thing you've been looking to believe in. and then you waste your money. You have the first thing for longevity, in my view, is mindset. The mindset is you don't have to spend money if you don't want to. There are things you can spend money on, but you don't have to. And so to that end, or with that in mind, in no particular order, for me, nutrition is something that it was very strong for me when it comes to my life hacks, if you like. Obviously, I'm 90 to 95% carnivore, with the exceptions that I mentioned earlier. I will make sure that I have plenty of sunshine. So if possible, I will work with the window open. Occasionally, if I've got a phone call to make, I'll try and go outside and I'll wander around in the sunshine to do that as well. If I, because I travel a lot with work, if I'm traveling and maybe I'm stuck inside a lab or a university lecture hall or something like that for several days in a row, in that situation, I might take a vitamin D supplement with vitamin K2. Not because I'm reliant on it, but because there are situations where I can't physically go outside. So it's a backup. And same with protein powder. I do have a protein powder, but it's not something I rely on. It's when I'm traveling, if I don't trust the food, or I think there's reason to potentially not trust the food, I keep it in my suitcase as a backup. That's all. They're pretty much the bulk of my supplements, and nothing else is going on. So the diet, the vitamin D, and appropriate levels of exercise for that individual. We'll go into my full routine. I think you get the principle behind that. But for me, those are the three biggest things that you can do. And ideally, if you have those things, your sleep is going to be great as well, without too much effort, because you're getting the right things in there. So they're probably the biggest things that I personally do. If people want to look beyond that, I do personally, I'm one of the biggest users of NAD+ clinically in the UK, I've been told. NAD+ I think is miraculous. However, it has the potential to be dangerous, and it must be used properly. And NAD+, just so people are aware, because I don't want people to see this and go, right, I'm going to buy NAD+ because he uses it. Just very, very briefly, NAD+ exists as one side of a coin, and the other side is NADH. And there's a ratio between those, and that's what's called a redox potential. If you just shove in NAD+ willy-nilly, you are going to have problems. So there is a right way and there's a wrong way to take it. So please don't think just because I use it a lot, you can just go and take it. There's more to it than that. But NAD+, yes, I've used that. I have seen patients with Alzheimer's symptoms improve, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, quicker than expected healing rates in ligament tears and broken bones, all sorts of amazing things, but if used safely. So I guess you could say the only sort of hack that I do is looking at the use of NAD+, and that's pretty much it. But the rest of it, very basic, very simple, not new, not expensive at all.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's all provided, isn't it? We have everything given to us that, sunlight's free. It's like, I know, like red light therapy is very big at the moment, and it's very good. It can be very useful as a tool if you can't get outside. But I mean, go outside; it's free.
Yeah, exactly.
Get a spectrum of light. So there's a lot of things that you can do, and I mean, I have 8 hacks, or 8 habits, I call them. But and honestly, none of them cost me anything. It's really just being outside, being grounded, getting sunlight, and things like that. So these are, small differences make a big impact.
Yeah. Yeah, small things done consistently over a long enough period of time outweighs pretty much any drug that you can take.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Especially, you see people, everyone wants to sell supplements. They all want to sell, all kinds of things. And people say, oh, I'm not taking any medications. I'm just taking, this full range of supplements sort of thing. Like, they're all made from the same companies, basically. They all come from pharmaceutical. I don't know if you ever heard of, was it Brian Johnson?
Yeah, I've definitely heard of him. Don't worry.
75 pills a day.
Yeah.
It's like, my God. Can you imagine what it's doing to his liver?
I made a video a while ago, still on my channel, basically explaining that if you take rapamycin, you're not going to live longer. It's not this miracle, right? You may see certain studies say it gave this benefit, but you have to read the study and realize it's BS. And I made a video basically saying, look, you should not be taking this because it makes no sense whatsoever. And when you understand it, theoretically, it should actually harm you. Surprise, surprise. A while after I made that video, he came out and said, look, I'm not going to take this. And I think, he saw that he was getting persistent infections. I could be wrong on this, of course. Someone please correct me if I am. But if I remember correctly, he was complaining about persistent infections. And I think his aging rate was actually increasing as a result of taking this. But again, like I said, I'm not quoting word for word. So do check it up and
the high carb diet would help too.
Yeah, exactly. And so people need to realize Brian Johnson's crusade may be noble in cause, that he's trying to see what he can learn about himself that might help other people. And I fully salute him for that. I think that's brilliant. I can't fault him. But I think, and it's not his fault, I have to say, I think the people around him who have been giving him BS advice are making his life more difficult than it needs to be. And I personally, this may be arrogant of me, I apologize to the viewers if it is, but I personally believe that if I was advising him, I could do a much better job of improving his, shall we say, aging rate, if there was such a thing as an aging meter, and get him in much better shape than the people that are currently advising him. And so my advice to people is, don't take what he does and just copy it, because there's things he does which is just nonsense.
No, I agree. No, I totally agree. It's largely just the fact that he is completely ignorant of nutrition and so on.
Yeah.
And it's just the people that he's chosen to have around him have given him this advice that the vegan diet, for example, and this enormous amount of supplementation is a healthy way to live. Yeah, it's crazy. It's certainly like if I was training him, that would be the complete opposite.
Yeah, I mean, think about the amount of plastic he's swallowing every day with 75 pills.
Well, that's it.
Unbelievable.
That's the thing that comes with a lot of these supplements, the PFAs, plastics, and everything else that get into them. So, think about even just the fact that, I mean, a lot of the powder form supplements as well, what that does to your liver, or that fructose, or that carbohydrates, everything else. And you can see it aging him. You can see it aging his skin. Look how pale his skin is.
I know.
And I looked very similar to that actually when I was first diagnosed, because I was on a very low-fat diet myself.
Oh, I see.
And a lot of carbohydrates as well. Typical fitness industry garbage. Yeah. But and that's what it leads to. It leads to fatty liver. And I mean, did you know, like one in almost 50% of men at the moment have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease?
I'm not surprised. Really not surprised.
That's incredible. It's incredible. But anyway. All right. Well, we've just hit it now, so I don't want to keep you too long. I know you're very busy. But any last bit of advice for anyone listening? How to stay healthy, keep or get healthy, stay healthy, and to, like you said, have a good health span, not so much a long lifespan, but a health span. Yeah,
and so I'm someone that's worked in this field for over a decade now. I calculated the other day that I have seen personally over 10,000 patients. I've now taught over 10,000 medical professionals as well. And I've seen a multitude of diseases and problems in all different patients in all different parts of the world. And with all that experience is what I'm about to say. So it's not coming from a place of just guesswork. It's actual hands-on physical clinical experience, as well as the knowledge that I have as well. And with all that together, my advice is the following. Your goals may be for health, they may be for cosmetic, they may be for a specific disease that has taken you away from health. You have to change your perspective and not see as, are my goals for health, or are they for cosmetic, or are they for a disease specifically? You have to get rid of that. You have to think, it doesn't matter what I'm, aiming for, because my route there is still the same. Regardless of whether you want to maximize your health span, or whether you want to improve in diabetes, or whether you want to look your best, you have to understand the number one thing for all of those is always nutrition and lifestyle, or diet and lifestyle. And that will never change. because the only reason our machinery within us, if we go back to that 3-stage perspective, the only reason that middle stage produces any output at all is based on the input. And the biggest input is what we put in our mouth. And so whatever your goals are, if you live your life without improving your knowledge and understanding of nutrition, you are doing yourself and your family and your future generations a disservice. If I could go back to my younger self, one of the things I would change is that I would look into nutrition a lot earlier and younger than I did. And I can't stress that enough, because that is the key, in my opinion, to really improving disease rates and improving mortality rates all across the world. And even if you feel as though you're not scientifically oriented, with channels like, for example, Ken Berry, Anthony Chaffee, Richard Smith, Stephen Thomas, Bart Kay, really fantastic channels, much better than mine, in fact, you can give yourself the education that is required, or the minimum education required, to become an expert in your individual nutrition, because you don't need a science degree to do that. And so whatever your goals are, number one, go to nutrition. Educate yourself, educate your family, educate your kids, and you'll never get a bigger return on an investment with that. Once you do that, then you're in a better place to look at the other things that will again improve, whether you're looking at health span, your disease, or your cosmetic sort of goals as well. And those are the other inputs. Okay, I'm not going to list them all, we've gone through them here, but such as exercise, vitamin D, etc. All you need to do is understand what are all the input options in your body. We have an input of what we put in our mouth, we have an input of UV radiation in our skin, we have an input of damage to muscle, etc., etc. Your job, regardless of what your goals are, is to understand those input boxes, if you like, and then understand the best way to tick those boxes. And then your machinery will take care of itself, and your output will be whatever is optimal for you, because that's what evolution is coded for over 4.5 to 6 million years, depending on which scientific paper you'd like to quote. And so you don't have to worry about blood tests per se. If there are exceptions individually, of course, but on the whole, you don't have to worry about blood tests. You don't have to worry about your specific level of this hormone or that hormone. You don't have to worry about what the number is when you stand on a set of scales. Those perspectives, in my view, in my personal view, are A, unnecessary, and B, lead to sort of unnecessary commercialization and profiteering at your expense, but not at your gain. There's nothing wrong with doing things at your expense, which are also for your gain, but you have nothing to gain from that, from a biological perspective at least. And so if you understand all the inputs into a human body, the things that go into your mouth being the most important, you have all the tools you need to be as healthy as possible for as long as possible. And never listen to anyone that can guarantee this will make you live longer or eradicate any disease. That's a scam, in my view. If they put that in a title for some marketing, just to get attention, and then they explain it underneath, that's fine, I get that. But to outright make the claim, don't fall for that ever. And teach yourself in the perspective that I've just said here. Understand human body's inputs, and that's all you need to go by.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Yeah, I'm big on, like, I have to keep track of a condition. That's why I do blood tests every 3 months, sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Where I think that's where people really trip themselves up. Like, they get obsessed with what their bloods are doing, not realizing that, well, your body's just doing whatever it needs to do at the time, like, and at the time of the blood test, sort of thing. Like, if you don't have any affects, there's really no reason to get a blood test at all.
100%.
I mean, even a couple of 100 years ago, people weren't so obsessed with bloods,
No, but at all. And even if you do bloods, it's actually not as simple as saying, well, I'm going to book a blood test. Like, if you want to measure testosterone, you can't just go and book a blood test. I know that sounds weird to say, but honestly, you can't. You have to diarize, when was the last time you ate? When was the last time you drank? How much sleep did you get? What time of day did you go? Etc., etc., etc. Then you do the blood test. And then you mimic those conditions, and you do it again, at least one other time. Then you actually have your level. So even doing a blood test, most of the time, can't actually tell you what you need to know, unfortunately.
No, that's right. Can't tell you anything, really. This is what I tell people too. Every time I do a blood test, I prepare before my blood test, I prepare the same way for a week before, because it takes days to for your bloods to recover from strength training and all sorts of other reasons that it takes days to sort of prepare for before you actually get your bloods done. And this is the thing too. People keep saying, "Oh, my testosterone level is low." It's like, well, how do you know? Honestly. So and that in itself, like you're saying, that leads to buying these marketed sort of supplements, and this will boost testosterone and this will boost the ketones, and so they take these exogenous sort of hormones replacements and things like that, and their body just stops making it themselves. So it's and like you said too, simple. Listen. I mean, it's free information. People like Richard Smith, you mentioned, brilliant guy, brilliant nutritionist. Well, I think one of the 100%. Best nutritionists in the world at the moment.
I agree.
And the information that you put out too, it's just it's phenomenal stuff. It's all free, and it's very simple for people to learn. It doesn't take much time, and it doesn't take much effort either. So I think it's well worth doing. And become your own doctor, become your own nutritionist. Excellent. Thanks very much, Abs. I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy schedule. But a great chat and great information. Hopefully, people get a lot out of this one. So.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.